So, in honor of recently DNFing a book, I thought I would make a video about all of the books that I've ever DNF'd and why I DNF'd them. I tend to not DNF books ever, and one of my goals is to DNF books and just put them down if I'm not enjoying them because life is too short to waste time reading books you can't stand. I finally DNF'd my first book of 2024. There were a couple that I probably wish I would have at this point, but I didn't. But this one I just absolutely could not stand and I had to DNF it. It was like 290 pages and I was literally on like page 201 when I put it down and said enough is enough, I'm done with this. And that was My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey. This book started off with an interesting premise. It was supposed to be a bounty hunter meets a woman who found a dead body in the Airbnb that she's staying at, and it was kind of like an enemies to lovers vibe and they were both trying to solve the murder, but the plot got completely lost by like page 100 and it turned into pure smut and not well written smut at that. Some of the smutty scenes were very cringy and taking place in public areas, which to me is quite disturbing in a way, so I just couldn't do it anymore. If that's your thing, then that's fine, but it just wasn't for me. It got to the point where I didn't even care how it ended, so I figured that was a really good time to just DNF it and move on with my life. I'm still counting that as a book that I've read this year though, because I almost got to the end of that thing. I did end up skimming through most of it. That's kind of the thing with me and DNFing, is that sometimes I still skim it to see if I'm gonna miss anything potentially, and this one I definitely was not, so no regrets. That one was a hard DNF, and Tessa Bailey is on thin ice with me because that is 2 for 2 that I have not liked by her. So next was 99% Mine by Sally Thorne. I loved The Hating Game and I thought this one was going to be just as good, and it was absolutely not. I think I got to page like 50 if that, and the main character was such a pick-me girl and would literally say things along the lines of I'm not like the other girls and stuff like that, and I just could not take it anymore. So I did end up skimming through some of this as well, but by skimming I mean like reading the first few sentences of a chapter and going okay next, and you know what? That one I do not regret DNFing at all. It was awful, and apparently I'm not the only one who thinks so, because a lot of reviews on Goodreads were super negative and had the same opinions that I did. So I'm not the only one, but that was one I was very happy to just put down and never pick up again. Next is one that I've kind of soft DNF'd, but to be honest with you, I think it's been like 10 or 11 years. So when I do decide to pick this up again, because I will eventually pick this up again, I think I might have to start it over, and that is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Fern. This one I got literally halfway through, and if you are familiar with this book, it is very chunky. It is a big book, and it kind of just got a bit slow for me. It's very detailed, and Jules Verne will go on for a couple of pages just kind of describing the scene and describing like different fish in the ocean and stuff like that, and though it was interesting at first, it kind of loses the excitement after a little while. This is one I do definitely want to get back into. It's not that I hated it, it's just that I kind of got bored with it, so I ended up putting it down and never picking it up again, but I did end up DNFing it, so I don't know. Hopefully I come back to that one someday. Then the next one is one I DNF'd last year, and that was Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. I was buddy reading this one, and the person I buddy read it with really loved it, and I wish I would have too. It was one of those ones that I really wanted to get into, and I can see why people would like it, but it just was not for me. So about halfway through, I kind of just started skim reading the chapters, and I don't know if it's really considered a DNF because I did skim read most of the chapters, but like I was not reading every single word or even every single page at points, and it just was not for me. So that one definitely got DNF'd, and I don't think I'll be picking up another Jay Kristoff just because I don't think we mesh well together. Another one that I kind of DNF'd, sort of skim read. Oh my gosh, Minnie. Okay, you have to see what my cat is doing because this is freaking adorable. Look at her. Say hi, Minnie. And there's Eowyn. And then Pippin's over there. The squad's all here, amen? You are too cute. You guys are hams. You're so funny. But anyway, back to what I was talking about. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and other short stories. So I read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and I read a few of the other short stories that were in this bind-up, and they were just not for me. They were very slow. I thought the entire bind-up of short stories were going to be like spooky stories, and they were not. The only spooky one really was Sleepy Hollow, and it wasn't even that spooky. I love the movie with Johnny Depp, and this was nothing like that. Obviously, this is classic literature, and I respect that, and I love classic literature, but this was not it for me. It was very boring, and most of the other short stories were as well, so I did end up skimming most of them, and I would consider this one a DNF. Another romance that I ended up DNFing was Out of His League by Carolyn Richardson. This one, once again, I skimmed through probably like the last third of it. It was interesting at first, but it became pretty clear pretty quickly that the author did not know much about baseball, and she had the audacity to write scenes where baseball was being played, and it was not good. It was not good. If you are going to write a story with a sport in it and have characters playing that sport and write about it, you really should do your research before you start writing about certain plays and stuff like that, because people will notice if you don't know what you're talking about. I'm gonna leave that one at that. And then the last book that I DNF'd is The League of Gentlewomen Witches by India Holton. This one was a huge disappointment to me. I didn't really like the first book in this duology, trilogy, I'm not quite sure what it is considered now, but this one was supposed to be kind of like an enemies to lovers. He was supposed to be comparable to Mr. Darcy, and the author was constantly trying to compare him to Mr. Darcy, and even had the characters, I think, talk about Mr. Darcy at one point. I don't know. I remember like 3 chapters in, I was really annoyed about the Mr. Darcy slander that was happening, and it was not it for me. I think I got about halfway through this one. I looked for the audiobook because I thought maybe that would get me through it, and I could not find the audiobook anywhere. So I ended up just skimming through like the last half of it. I don't recommend this one either. This author and I don't seem to get along. I can't follow her writing and her plots. Definitely not for me, and I don't think I'll ever pick up anything by India Holton ever again. But I do know some people like it, so if it sounds like it could be your cup of tea, maybe give it a try, because some people do enjoy it. Okay, then I thought it would be kind of fun to do some honorable mentions or books I wish I hadn't finished. So first off for me is super easy. It's The Catcher in the Rye. I did not like this book. I'm gonna be honest with you though, it was like 10 years ago that I read it, and I read it for school. And I don't really remember what happened in it, only that I was miserable reading it. And had it not been for school, I definitely would have DNF'd it and never picked it up again ever. And you know what? I think this goes for Lord of the Flies as well. I'm gonna group those two together. Those are 2 books that I had to read for school that I really wish I could have DNF'd. They were not my favorite. The difference between them is I do not remember anything that happened in Catcher in the Rye, and I remember everything that happened in The Lord of the Flies, and I wish that I didn't. So don't hate me for this, because I know so many people love this book. I am not one of those people. It's A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I could not stand the main character. Her name's Pip or something. I couldn't stand her. The entire time I was just thinking to myself, you know, if you tell an adult about these things that are happening, you wouldn't be in this predicament. I don't know. She was just very naive and made some really stupid decisions, and I could not stand it. But I also do not like teen detective tropes because I find them super unrealistic, and they just have me like yelling at the book or the screen the entire time. I can't stand the decisions that are made, and I'm always thinking, why don't you tell an adult? Honestly. I do not want to spoil anything, but there is a part with a dog involved that I just think if she would have gone to a trusted adult, certain things wouldn't have happened. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not here to spoil this for anybody, but I was really peeved reading it, and I didn't read the sequels, and I'm never going to read the sequels because I can't. I cannot with that book. Next was... oh my god, my eye. So they just flew into my eye. The next book I wish I had DNF'd and just listened to my gut was another Tessa Bailey, and that was Love Her or Lose Her. This one was another really smutty one, but I also could not stand either of the main characters. I found he was a very arrogant, big egotistical jerk, and she was just not my favorite. I don't even remember much about the female character in it, to be honest. Only that I didn't really like her. That is one that I definitely wish I would have DNF'd. The next one I wish I would have DNF'd is Monstrous. This is a graphic novel. I ended up reading books 1 and 2, which are massive bind-ups of I think like... well, that was rude. Of I think like 10 or so comics like in one volume, and I paid like $60 to $70 for each of those books. So I'll be damned if I did not read them cover to cover, and I did, and I wish I hadn't. I wish I had not wasted my time, especially with the second book. I should have just listened to myself and not wasted my time, but I did end up finishing it. I did end up not liking it, and I did end up giving it to someone else. Then the last book I wish I would have DNF'd was The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. If you do plan on picking up this book, I am going to tell you a piece of very vital information that I do not think was provided to the reader soon enough in the book, or even on the back little blurb. So this book is about witches who can fly houses. That was not explained. It was just kind of, I guess, assumed that the reader knew that. I didn't know that. I was like 4 chapters into this book and I had no clue what was going on. I literally looked it up on Goodreads and read someone else's review, and it was mentioned in that, and I realized what was happening. The plot felt very scatterbrained and it didn't flow very nicely, and it just at times made no sense. Also, some characters go by multiple names, and that is also very confusing. That entire book just feels like a fever dream to me, and not a good fever dream, honestly, more like a fever nightmare. And for some reason, when I finished that, I thought it would be a good idea to pick up the sequel, and I don't know why, but I did. So anyway, that is going to do it for me. Those are the books that I DNF'd or wish I DNF'd. And talking about the ones that I wish I DNF'd, I'm realizing that I really do need to just start DNFing books when I'm not vibing with them. Life is too short. It is way too short to be reading books you don't like. Let me know in the comments any books you DNF'd or wish you DNF'd and why. And let me know if you read any of these books that I just mentioned and if you loved them or hated them as well. Be very interested to know. I know a lot of people love A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, so I definitely expect somebody to be mad at me for that one, but hey, we all are entitled to our different opinions. And if you read that one and enjoyed it, I'm jealous of you, honestly. But with that, I hope you have a great rest of your week and happy reading.